did we cover? Aaron, very good. Next. Caleb. Ray. Ahab the Arab. Yes, we covered Rahab. Oh, that's okay. There was some time that I was totally mispronouncing somebody's name and no one ever corrected me. And it was pretty embarrassing when they finally did. I kind of blocked that from my memory other than just remembering that it happened. So tonight we're going to be talking about Gideon. If you want to turn to Judges chapter 9, that's where we will be starting tonight. Judges chapter 9. Gideon, somebody, of course, that we all have heard about and studied and thought about before. So let's look at Judges chapter 6, and we'll be reading verses 1 through 6 to begin with. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds which are in the mountains. So it was, whenever Israel had sown, Midianites would come up against, also Amalekites, and the people of the east would come up against them. Then they would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents, coming in as numerous as locusts. Both they and their camels were without number, and they would enter the land to destroy it. So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. I don't know about you, but when I read this, every time I read this, I think about the 7 samurai, or the Magnificent Seven, or even A Bug's Life, because that's what happened, These people were growing all their stuff, and somebody came in and just swarmed in and took it all up from them. They just took it away, and they didn't want to have any, or they just wanted to take it away. But this is not a movie. This is a real story. This is something that really did happen to the children of Israel. Of course, the reason it happened is because they did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord was not happy with them. And so they had to pay for their evil with captivity and impoverishment. And even after all of this, even after God was so mad with them, he still sent a prophet. Am I too loud? Is that what it is? Or have I got this too high? I just keep hearing this echo. God sent them a prophet to tell them once again how they had been brought up out of Egypt and had been brought to this place and all that God had done for them. And he was reminding them of how they had turned their backs on him time and time again. But God did not forget them. And here's what happens beginning in verse 11. We find out how God was going to react. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash, the Abiezrite. I'm a lot better at this pronunciation thing. While his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. The Lord sent an angel to talk to Gideon, not to Joash, but he sent this angel to him. Joash was a man of Manasseh, which was part of the tribes that came from Joseph. They lived in Ophrah, and actually there is a modern-day city called Ophrah. It's spelled differently. It's not spelled O-P-H-R-A-H. It's spelled O-F-R-A. It's located on the west bank, and it's between Jerusalem and Nablus, and they say that it is pretty close to the original site. Joash was a man who had turned from worshiping God, just like others had, to worshiping Baal. When the angel arrives, he doesn't go to Joash, he goes to Joash's son, Gideon. And Gideon is threshing wheat in a wine press. And the reason he's doing that is so he can hide that wheat from the Midianites, so they won't take it from him when they come swarming down. They did this to keep the Midianites from confiscating it and leaving them nothing to eat. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Judges 6:12. How would you feel if an angel came to you and said something like this to you? "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." First of all, it's an angel coming to you, and second of all, giving you a compliment. You mighty man of valor. Now, you might think, what did I do to deserve this compliment? And here's what Gideon said in the 13th verse. "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? And where are all his miracles, which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." That sound familiar to you? How many times have you heard somebody say, if God really loves me, why did this happen to me? If God really cares about me, why in the world did this happen? Why did my 6-year-old son get hit by a car? Why did I get this disease? Why did somebody else get that disease? As a matter of fact, a lot of people say things like, "Why me, Lord?" Remember the old song Chris Christopherson did? I actually pronounced his name correctly. "Why me, Lord?" Remember that song? That was actually a song about, why are you giving me all these blessings? And that's really what we should be asking most of the time is, why did you give me all these blessings? But instead, a lot of people say that. Why in the world are all these things happening to me? And Gideon was no different. We're no different than Gideon was. Gideon said, why in the world is all this stuff happening? But Gideon got an unexpected answer. In 6:14, then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" It's not the angel that talks to him now. It's the Lord that talks to him, that says, "I am calling you." Do you think that would get your attention? If an angel's speaking to you and then you don't listen to him and then God himself says something to you, I think that'd get my attention. I don't know about you, but I think it would probably get my attention. But interestingly enough, he still isn't sure. Just like Moses, Gideon is pretty good at making excuses. He's pretty good at making things a little bit difficult. "I'm from the weakest tribe," he says. "I'm from this puny tribe of Manasseh. I'm from the smallest tribe. And not only that, I'm the runt of the family. I'm the smallest of the family." Later on, of course, we would hear the same thing with David, the smallest of the family, but God used him. And of course, we all do that sometimes, don't we? We were just talking about this. People were telling me, somebody said something about the class. And, whenever somebody says something to me, I always, I'm not that good, and I don't do all of this stuff. And we tend to always denigrate ourselves, don't we? Is there anybody here besides me that does that? None of you do it? You downplay your talents. You downplay your abilities. You downplay the effect that you have on other people. Now, sometimes it's modesty. I'm the most modest person I know. Okay, one of you laughed. That's good. Thank you very much. Sometimes it's modesty, but sometimes it's because we don't have confidence in ourselves. And you know what? If we don't have confidence in ourselves, in some respect, that's not having confidence in God, isn't it? Because who gave you your talents? Who gave you your abilities? Who gave you the chance to do the things that you do, the opportunities to do the things that you do? We say things like, who do I think I am? I don't have a formal education. I don't have the brains to do God's work. Why does He want me to go do these things? Why in the world does He want me to go do these things? And that's really sad, because God makes the difference, and a little faith can go a long way. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said this: "They can conquer who believe they can." And Paul said it even better in Romans 1:17, "The just shall live by faith." Does anybody here know who Billy Mills is? Pardon? Billy Mills. Oh, good. I know something none of you know. Billy Mills is was an Olympic runner back in the 1964 Olympics. And if you've ever seen the movie Running Brave that Disney did, that's his story. Billy Mills came from an impoverished background. He lived on an Indian reservation. His parents were just totally poor. Let me read it. He was raised in poverty on the Pine Ridge, Oglala Lakota Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, Dakota, surrounded by alcoholism and depression. His parents separated. His mother remarried his uncle, but died when Mills was 9. His father died 4 years later. Soon after the mother's death, his father sat with a despondent boy one day and told him he could rise from having broken wings, and one day you will fly like an eagle. Mills worked really hard to get through school, got a scholarship to go to Kansas University, Kansas State, I think. Can't remember if it's Kansas or Kansas State. It was one of those Kansas schools. And was a runner, a distance runner. Eventually, he ran the 10,000 meters. And in the 1964 Olympics, he became the first American, and to this date, the only American to ever win the 10,000 meter race in the Olympics. And if you have a chance, you go home tonight or tomorrow sometime, look that up on YouTube, Billy Mills, 64 Olympics. It's one of the greatest races you'll ever see. He was not expected to do anything in that race. And as a matter of fact, he led one of the laps, and he said, the only reason I led the lap was because I wanted to be able to say, I led the lap, one lap in the Olympics. But he ended up winning the race in the last 60 or 70 yards. And it was because he had that talent, and he used that talent, and he believed what he could do. And it's because somebody believed in him earlier and said, one day you will fly like an eagle. Mills said this: once he discovered his running talent as a teenager, he always believed that the Olympics would be my day to fly. And what was it that was told us in the scriptures? They that wait upon the Lord shall mount with eagles, with the wings of eagles. And we will fly. We can fly if we want to. We have more within us than we can possibly imagine. And the same was true of Gideon. He had no idea what he had inside him until the Lord brought it out. In Judges 6:16, the Lord said to him, surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man. That's quite a tall order, isn't it, for a guy who was sitting there threshing wheat in a wine press. And God says, I have the confidence and faith in you because I'm going to give you this talent. Gideon asks for a sign. And he asks the angel who is there to wait while he goes to get a gift. And it turns out that the gift is some food. It's meat and unleavened bread. He returns with it. The angel says, lay it on this rock, and Gideon does. The angel touches the meat and the bread with a staff, and fire rises from the rock and consumes both of them. And after this, the angel leaves. Now, would you be impressed with something like that? That's a mighty big miracle, isn't it, to see that stuff just boom, like that. Well, it had almost the reverse effect on Gideon. In Judges 6:22, Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord, so Gideon said, alas, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But God himself spoke again, peace be with you, do not fear, you shall not die. And with that, Gideon built an altar to the Lord on the spot. That night, Gideon is tested by the Lord. The Lord asks him to pull down his father's idol to Baal. And he does it that night. He takes 10 men with him, and he goes out and he pulls down that idol. And he offers a sacrifice on a new altar that he builds to God on that spot. But he does it at night. Now, the Lord did say, go knock down this idol, but he didn't tell him exactly when to do it. So the question is, do you think that God meant for Gideon to do that immediately that night? Or maybe wait till the next morning when he could do it in broad daylight so that everybody could see what he was doing? Anybody venture a guess?
I don't think they would let him do it.
I don't think they would have either. I think he did it that night because he had to do it at night so that he could actually do it. Also, if he tried to do it during the day, it would have caused quite a commotion. And as you said, people wouldn't have let him do it. And it's also, as we'll find out as we continue, Gideon is still fearful. He's still fearful of what's going to happen. He doesn't have the complete and total confidence and trust in what God wants him to do and how far God will be behind him. Somebody going to say something? Okay. So when the people do find out what he did the next day, and they find out that it is Gideon, they demand that Gideon be brought to them. They're going to take care of him. But his father defended him. Now remember, his father is now a worshiper of Baal. But fatherly love trumps the love of Baal, apparently. So in Judges 6:31, he says to these people gathered around, would you plead for Baal? Would you save him? Let the one who would plead for him be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him plead for himself, because his altar has been torn down. So the challenge to these people is, look, if this God is really a god, let him take care of this. You don't take care of it, you let him take care of it for you. So the people don't kill Gideon, but they do give him a nickname. And his nickname is Jerubbaal. And Jerubbaal means Baal's antagonist, which is a great nickname for him. Baal's antagonist. Now it's at this time that the Midianites and the Amalekites get ready to do battle against Israel. They cross over and camp in the valley of Jezreel. The Holy Spirit tells Gideon, but Gideon is still fearful, is not fearful at this news. He blows the trumpet to call his fellow Abiezrites, his fellow people, together, and the messengers are sent out. And because of this call, 32,000 men gather together to be part of what's going to happen. 32,000 men. Now, you've heard God talk to you. You've blown the trumpet. You've seen the food be burned up. You've blown the trumpet. You've done everything God asked you to. Now God says, you got 32,000 men, but Gideon's still a little bit cautious about this. And we all know this story. He asks for a sign. He lays the fleece out and he says, look, Lord, if it's really you, tonight I want you to just let the dew fall on the fleece and have it not wet all around. And that's what happens. And he says, excuse me for asking you this, Lord, but could you do that one more time? Only this time reverse it. This time have the fleece stay dry and everything else get wet. And God does it. But notice, God doesn't get angry with him for this, even though he's doing this. He just does what he asks him to do. Have you ever considered what effrontery this is for Gideon to ask this of the Lord? I mean, here's the Lord telling him, you need to do this, you need to do this. And he says, well, prove it to me. And that's what he's saying, prove it to me. Prove to me that it's you so that I can understand that it's you. And he keeps proving it and proving it and proving it. But he doesn't want to because he wants these signs. Have you ever heard anybody say, if God would just send me a sign, I'd believe in him? How many times have you heard somebody tell you that? If God would just send me a sign, I'd believe in him. There's a movie, it's a Steve Martin movie. It's called The Man with Two Brains. Some of you may have seen it. But there's a scene in the movie where he's fallen in love with this woman and he's not sure what to do, and his wife had died many years before. So he goes into the living room and he says, I don't know what I should do. He looks at her portrait and he says, I don't know what I should do. Should I marry her or not? If you just give me a sign. And you hear this voice say, no, no. And the wind starts blowing and this picture starts spinning. And then after it goes on for a moment, he says, any sign will do. Just any sign will do. And of course, his mind was already made up what he wanted to do. And that's what happens a lot of times is, your mind's made up and you're going to believe this, you're going to do this. Years ago, I've told you I've done work down in Haiti, and back in the early 2000s, I was supposed to go down there. And the week before, I think it was a week and a half before I was supposed to go down there, they had a revolution, and we couldn't go. So I wanted to go after that, and wanted to go. So a few years ago, I got another chance. I had my sabbatical from work. I had everything planned, had the tickets bought, had everything put together. The day before I was supposed to go, they had a revolution. That night, I just looked up and I said, okay, I've got the message. You don't want me down there. I'll do something else. Maybe that's a sign. I don't know if it is or not, but I'm taking it as a sign. And I'm going to put my efforts someplace else. I'll still pray for them. I'll still work with them when they're here. But I don't think the Lord wants me there. He may want me someplace else. So sometimes we miss those signs. Is anybody else here? This is confession time here. Have you ever had that little sign, you know? Occasionally we do, and we wonder to ourselves, is that God talking to me or what? And I'm not, by the way, saying that God taps you on the shoulder and says these things to you. But sometimes providence works to move you in a certain way. And that's why we always need to keep our eyes open. That's why we always need... Remember Paul said, pray without ceasing? And part of that is to listen to God and to hear what he has to say. You know, sometimes we're going to misinterpret the signs, but we still need to work at it. We still need to do the things that we need to do for him. So in Judges 7:1, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the wall of Harod, so that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. It's at this point that God challenges Gideon to see just how much faith he really does have. He tells him, 32,000 is just too many guys. I don't need that many to conquer the Midianites. So here's what we want to do. If I do that now, then the people will say, well, we did it. But I want them to understand, and I want the Midianites and everybody else to know, it's not you that's given the victory, I'm going to give the victory. So he tells Gideon to tell everybody who is scared to go home. 22,000 men leave. Have you ever sat there reading this and thought to yourself, man, I wonder what those 10,000 who were left thought? 22,000 people leave, and now you've got 10,000 people. I wonder if it was their faith in God or their faith in Gideon, or maybe both, that made those 10,000 stay. But God was not done. He still said that there were too many there. So he said, what you need to do is march them down to a stream and tell everybody to take a drink. I've often wondered how I would drink when I've heard this story. Would I have gotten on my knees or would I have done this? I don't know for sure. I know today there's no way I would get on my knees because I couldn't get back up. But I'm not a young guy anymore. So he tells them to do this, and everybody who kneels down and puts his face in the water is eliminated. Everybody who stoops down and puts the water in their hand and laps it like a dog is okay. They can come with me. And when everything is winnowed down, there are only 300 men left. I guess if you count Gideon and his servant, that's 302. But 300 men are left. It is supposed by some that those who knelt had left themselves in a vulnerable position, but those who lapped were on alert at all times. So they would be smart soldiers. So let's look, we'll read Judges 7, 9 through 11 here to find out a little bit more about the story. It happened on the same night that the Lord said to him, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have delivered it into your hand." Now, stop right there. God says, go down to the camp, I've delivered it into your hands. And God has done all of this stuff for you, and now he's telling you, go, go. But then he says, but if you're afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. And then he went down with Purah, his servant, to the outpost of the armed men who were in the camp. In other words, he's saying, I think you still have some problems. I think you're still a little bit fearful. And if you are, just go ahead and listen to what they have to say. Go ahead and listen to the people down there. And Gideon does it. He takes him up on the offer, which I thought was pretty interesting. God tells Gideon to go with the 300, but then he also says that if Gideon's afraid, then he should go listen to him. And it's, you know, if you think about it, it's much like God did for Elijah's servant. Remember when Elijah's servant was so scared because all these people were surrounding it, the city, and Elijah prayed, "Let my servant see." And the servant saw thousands and thousands of angels surrounding the area. And he knew that God was there. God was going to open Gideon's eyes too. Actually, he was going to open his ears. That's how powerful he is. Notice that God told Gideon to go listen, but also said that he might be scared, so he should take someone with him. He didn't want him to go alone. Were you going to say something, Bobby?
No,
Oh.
I don't know anything.
Oh, yeah, you do. You know a lot. You know a lot. I just heard somebody over there. I was waiting for Jeff. No, I'm just kidding with you.
He said something.
Oh, he says it. Kazi.
Oh, go ahead.
Did you have something to say?
What?
Did you have something to add?
There you go.
You want to share this with the class, young man?
I just think.
You know, I warned you the first or second week. I said, don't look like you're going to say anything or scratch your head because I'll call on you. So anyway, he sent them out he didn't want Gideon to go alone. He wanted somebody to go with him. And that's just like we're told that we should do. You know, Jesus said, you go out 2 by 2. You go out 2 by 2. You're not alone. Solomon said that in Ecclesiastes. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. And if one fall, the other will lift up his companion. And so that was what God told him to do, was to take somebody with him. It's confession time again. Are you ever scared to go into the enemy camp?
I know I would be.
I'm not talking about this enemy. I'm talking about the enemy now. How scared are we to go into the enemy camp? It's something that I think about myself a lot of times. It's kind of hard to talk to people sometimes. It's kind of hard when you know how a lot of people are in the reaction to the gospel or in the reaction to even just God. Jeff?
You'll know when the time comes.
Oh, I know.
You'll never know. If you are, it's easy to make a decision about something and to say something, I'll be this, I'll do this, I'll do that. But when the time comes is when you'll know. And that's when you all doubt is put to the side. You'll know.
Yeah, the first sermon I ever preached here at Monroe in 1999 was called Attention. And if you've ever seen Patton, I used the opening speech that Patton, I didn't use all those other words that he used in there. But I would use that one phrase that he used in there. He said, if you think if you think you can't shoot the enemy, if you think you can't fight, and you think you're going to run away, he says, well, when you stick your hand, now I'm not going to be gross, but it is gross. When you stick your hand into a pile of goo that was your friend's face just a few moments ago, you'll know you can fight. Well, you know something? When you stand over the casket of your next door neighbor or a friend of yours who you had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to tell the gospel to, you'll know what to do the next time. And you never did it. You'll know what to do the next time you have an opportunity. Because God gives us those opportunities. Just like he did with Gideon. The opportunities to do things for him. So Gideon and Purah went to this camp, and a man was telling a dream of a cake rolling into the camp and smashing all of the tents. Apparently had come from a school cafeteria. The man was listening to the other man that was listening to the dream, interpreted the dream that God had delivered the Midianites and the Amalekites to Israel. And that's what he did. This is the same case in many times that God uses dreams to get his messages across. And of course we know Jacob and Joseph and Solomon, Daniel, Peter, all kind of dreams in the Bible. Gideon returns to those 300 men very encouraged. Arise, for the Lord has delivered the camp of Midian into your hand, he says in Judges 7:15. Now compare that response to the first response. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Now, he says, we're going to take the Midianites God's going to take them for us. Paul said later, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us?" You see how far he has come in such a short time. He now understands that the Lord is with him. He supplies each man with a trumpet and an empty pitcher into which they put torches. Put yourself in the place of one of these soldiers. Okay, trumpet, pitcher. Okay, if that's what you say. Now understand, they had to have confidence in Gideon, didn't they? They didn't hear God. They had to have confidence in Gideon. They had to say, okay, I'm going to believe that Gideon is doing what the Lord told him to do. So he tells them to do like I do. He divides them into groups of 300, and they surround the camp that night. Just after the changing of the guard, Gideon and the men broke their pitchers so that the light would shine through. They blew their trumpets and they shouted. Kind of reminds you of Jericho, doesn't it? Except for the pitchers. When the angel comes to Gideon, angel told it. Let me get that out of the way. When the angel had come to Gideon earlier, Gideon had told him that he'd heard all the stories about the miracles about that God had done for Israel, and all those stories that God had instructed the Israelites to tell their children. Now I want to go back for just a moment. Remember that Joash had turned to Baal. He no longer followed God. But here's Gideon telling the angel that, I know all those stories. Have you ever considered where he got that knowledge? Do you hear it from his friends? What were all the parents instructed to do? To tell these stories to their children so that they would know who God is. And apparently Joash had at least done that. I don't know for sure. Maybe he heard it from his friends. I don't know, but he'd heard them and he knew those stories. So we might give a little bit of credit to Joash at this time. So let's see. I'm trying to get through this, and we've only got a few minutes left. I don't know. I still can't understand how this time goes by so quickly. So let's see. In 17 through 18, Gideon says, "Look at me and do likewise. Watch, and when I come to the edge of the camp, you shall do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you also blow the trumpets on every side of the whole camp and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon." Now the point I wanted to bring out about this is that Gideon was there on the front lines. Gideon was there in the middle of the battle. Gideon was not telling them to do something he himself was not going to do. As a matter of fact, he was going to lead the way. It's the middle of the night. The guards have just changed, and Gideon blew the trumpet. The men broke their lanterns and shouted. The Midianites and the Amalekites were scared out of their minds. They didn't know what in the world was going on. They ran around in confusion, and they ended up killing each other. And the ones who survived ran away. When news of the rout spread, men from Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh took up the battle. They chased the enemy. The Ephraimites also asked to join the battle. The Ephraimites captured Oreb and Zeb, killed them, and brought their heads back to Gideon. Gideon, as the leader, was apt to get all kind of gifts now. Gideon, who had begun scared, had now become a great leader for God. He went on to be a great judge for the children of Israel, keeping them pointed in the direction of God. He had 70 sons. Those of you who have 4 or 5 kids, how would you like to have 70 sons? He had 70 sons, for he had many wives and died at a good old age. The battle that Gideon fought that night became known as the Day of Midian. It is mentioned in Isaiah 9:4, "For you have broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian." It's also mentioned in Isaiah 10:26, "And the Lord of hosts will stir up a scourge for him like the slaughter of Midian at the rock of Oreb." It was a great day for Israel, a wonderful day for Israel. And Gideon is remembered as a great leader. I've read, several things about great leaders in the Bible, and Gideon is always there. Gideon is always mentioned as a great leader. But he wasn't always a great leader. He had it in him to be a great leader. It took God to bring that out and make him basically use his talents the way they needed to be used. He was the smallest of his family, just like David, but he had history to lean on. He remembered the acts of Joshua and the acts of God in bringing the children of Israel out of bondage. His choosing and his growth as a leader is a great example of how God can use anyone. And we say that, I say that, everybody says that all the time. God can use anyone. God can use anyone. Did somebody, oh, yes, Steve. You're going to have to shout. You say, Scott.
One of the lessons here, they said that the Midianites and the Amalekites had, the camels were more than the sands of, more than the sand. These 300 guys had to be looking at that going, we're going into certain death. There were only 300 of them. I couldn't imagine being one of those people. They had to have faith like I can't fathom.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a lesson there in itself.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like I said earlier, it's faith in Gideon, in believing that Gideon was listening to God, but also that faith in God. And don't forget, these people had turned to Baal. They probably had family and loved ones who were worshiping Baal. So yes, the faith had to be very strong with them to be able to stand there and not only face the enemy, but face the enemy with a trumpet and a bowl with a fire in it, with a torch in it. That's just absolutely amazing. Now, what I was going to say is God can use anyone. It doesn't matter what your pedigree is. It doesn't matter what your education level is. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what your bank account is. It doesn't matter about anything. People say, I'm not good enough. Actually, there are some people that say I'm too good. You've heard them before. Both of them are wrong. Everyone is important in God's eyes. Everyone is important to the kingdom in some way. Everyone has a talent that they can use for the Lord. Remember when the disciples were arguing over who would be greatest among them? And Jesus rebuked them for their attitude. Let the one who would be first be last. And that's the way it needs to be. Gideon was a servant. He may have been a reluctant servant to begin with, but he became a great servant for God, and he became a great leader for the children of Israel. And he did that because he was prudent. Gideon's request for proof that the angel was of God was not of lack of faith as much as it was an act of caution. You know how cautious you need to be when you go online, don't you? You get those scam calls all the time on your phone, things like that. Sometimes it pays to be cautious because we don't know. So Gideon wanted proof there. The question I have here, and we don't have enough time to answer this, so I probably ought not to ask this, but I'm going to anyway. Is it wrong to question God? Is it wrong to question God? I'll let y'all think about that. Can you think of any Bible people who ever questioned God? Jesus did. Can you think of any who argued with God? Abraham. He bargained with God, actually. Somebody say something over here?
There's a difference in questioning God and asking God a question.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that out. I appreciate that. Yes. And yeah, Moses gave all the excuses and why are you using me and all that stuff. Yeah.
Jonah.
Go ahead.
What she said, Jonah.
I'm sorry.
Jonah.
Jonah. Oh, thank you.
Why, welcome.
What? I have hearing aids too, Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have him down there. Elijah questioned God. People question God, but just like you said, there's a difference between questioning God, and we know a lot of people who question God nowadays, and asking questions about God. There's a big difference between that. Gideon wanted to be sure that the angel was truly from God, and there is nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, we're told to be diligent to rightly divide the word of truth, aren't we? We're also told that the Bereans were more noble because they made sure that the apostles were teaching what was in the Scriptures. They made sure that they were from God. He was also involved. He led his men into battle and was there on the front lines. It's worth noting that Judges 7:21 plainly says that the army of Israel stood every man in his place. Now, it's one thing to get out, surround them. It's one thing to break the torches or the bowls. It's one thing to blow your trumpets. But when the enemy starts yelling and screaming and running around, it's another thing to stand your ground. But they stood their ground. They believed the Lord. They believed in Gideon, and they stood their ground. And Gideon was obedient. He did what God told him to do. I asked why to begin with, why are you calling me? But later on didn't ask why when God sent people home, leaving Gideon with only 300 soldiers. You would think, why are you doing this, Lord? But he understood that God had his reasons for doing this, and so he was going to go along with it. It's going to sound crazy when I say this, but baseball is a simple game, those of you who like baseball. You throw the ball, you hit the ball, you catch the ball. A godly life can be fairly simple too. You learn the Word, you obey the Word, and you get involved using the Word. And then you stand back and watch what God can do through you. Not you can do, what God can do through you. There's an author named Gabriel Wilson who said this: success certainly isn't achievement of popularity. Success in God's kingdom is loving God, loving one another, and being faithful to what He's called us to do. I have a question for you. If God came to you and said, I want you to do battle for me with 100 people, what would your answer be? How many people are in this congregation? About 100, aren't there? Guess what? He's already asking you to do that. Gideon was willing to go fight these guys with the light because God told him to do that. And the question is, are we willing to go fight this battle for him with the light of the Word because He's asked us to do that? Any questions, any comments, thoughts? Anybody want to throw bricks at me or anything? Okay. Thank you very much. Lord willing, next week we will talk about sisters. Leah and Rahab. No, not Rahab. Rachel. Thank you. We talked about Rahab before. Or Ahab, one or the other. Thank you very much.
We're happy to see everyone out this evening. A couple announcements first before I give the invitation. Please be aware that the alarm system is now on. It's very, very simple. If you think you're going to be somebody that wants to come in and turn it off and so forth, just tell me, and I have the codes over in my pew. Just come and see me, and I'll give you a code. It's only 4 numbers, and it's real easy. There's nothing complicated about our system at all. But it is on, so if you come in and set it off, Charles will be getting a call over there. And you have to look and see, on his camera, who's in the building? So anyway, we've got it covered. Don't worry about it. No big deal. I've got an official announcement here from Tom Tittle. It says, this is the official announcement that Wednesday meal will start next week. Okay, so Wednesday meal that we used to have will start again next week. So Tom says this is the official announcement. Now, if you want to attend that meal, you've got a sign-up sheet, Tom, or what?
No, just show up.
Just show up,
Nobody
okay.
signed the sheet, so we're going to
He's going to have food, don't worry about it.
start at 6.
As far as ill folks, Pat Gibson, remember her, she's recovering from her surgery. Edwina is here this evening. I didn't get a chance to talk to her to see how she's feeling. We're happy to see her here. We haven't seen Timmy Thomas for a while, so he obviously I'm able to come. Don't forget Almeida, that we're asked to visit her Thursday through Sunday, I believe it is. I know some people have already been to see her. She's in the Renaissance Rehab. If you need more information on that, well, see Tom or Barbara, and they'll tell you how to get to that Renaissance Rehab Center. I notice we still have some empty spots on our fall festival that Scott's put together. We need to get those filled in. It's on the back table. We only have 2 spots left. What?
David is not going to be going out of town,
Oh,
so he will be here.
okay, but we can still visit.
Yeah, you can still visit.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Susan Thomason, she's requested special prayers for her mother, Becky Stevens, has colon cancer, and they'll be having surgery on her Monday. So we need to pray for Susan. Jerry and Dottie Shepard, their great-grandson, has been in ICU with pneumonia. We need to remember them. And Tom and Linda Parker, their daughter Deanna Huff, has been having trouble. They haven't been able to diagnose what's wrong with her yet. Let's see. Not going to one other thing here. I don't know whether we've got cards out there that need signed or not, but we do. Okay. So Dottie says we do. So remember, if you have a few minutes, drop by and sign the cards every evening. Again, glad to see everyone out this evening. Glad to see any of our visitors. We're going to have a invitation now. If you have not, I think most of everybody here that I see here this evening has put on Christ. But if you haven't put on Christ, well, now is the time that you would come forward. Also, if you're having troubles with the Lord, if you need prayers of the congregation, now is the time to come forward and have those prayers as we sing our invitation song.
There's a fountain free, 'tis for you and me. Let us haste, oh, haste to its brink. There's a fount of love from the source above, and he bids us all freely drink. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a rock that's cleft, and no soul is left that may not its pure water share. 'Tis for you and me, and the stream I seek. Let us hasten joyfully there. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all.
Will you bow with me? Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful again for this place that we have to be able to come and study and hear a portion of your word. And we pray that as we have listened to the lesson tonight as Gideon, may we be that one that go out and be that one person to be able to spread the word, to be able to go on to this world. We know that as we continue to teach others, there is only one way to heaven, and that's through the Scriptures. And we know, Lord, that as we continue to strive to do thy will, there will always be hindrances, but we'll continue to look to you for the strength that we need day by day. We continue praying for our elders here, to give them the knowledge to lead the congregation here. But we know that as we need our teachers, and we're so thankful that we have our minister that brings forth the bread of life. To continue being with him, that he'll always be able to spread the word here. Strengthen each and every one of us. We're praying for the ones that are unable to be with us this evening due to illness or other things which hinder them for being here, that they'll be back with us the next appointed hour. We pray for Brother and Sister West. They've been a long time, and one day we'll see them again here. There's many others that are on the prayer list. Sister Cooper, be with her, so she can be back with us soon. We know, Lord, that we'll always look to thee for the strength that we need day by day. Always forgive us we fail thee. For this we ask thee in Jesus' name. Amen.